Hi, good evening. Just want to call the meeting to order for the Oxnard Community Services Public Safety Housing and Development Committee for October 28th, 2025. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call and posting of the agenda followed by the Pledge of Allegiance that Councilwoman McKellar is going to lead us on.
Committee Member Perallo. Here. Committee Member Perez.
Here.
Chair MacArthur.
Here.
The agenda was posted in the kiosk at City Hall, the Oxnard Public Library, the city administrative offices, and on the city's website on Tuesday, October 21st. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We'll go to the first item on the agenda. This is for public comments for items not on the agenda and for non-action items. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
And Chair MacArthur and committee members, we do not have any public speakers in person or virtually for items not on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing that, we'll move to the first item on the agenda. This is the consent agenda. The only item I see here is the approval of the minutes for the June 24th, July 8th, July 22nd, September 9th, September 23rd, and October 14th, 2025 Community Services, Public Safety, Housing, and Development Committee meeting. Do any members have any questions or comments on the approval of the consent agenda?
If there's no comments from the public, I'll move the action.
Thank you, sir. Second.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, call for the vote. First, are there any public speakers on the consent agenda?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, we do not have any public speakers for the information and consent agenda.
Call for the vote.
Committee Member Perez.
Yes.
Committee Member Perallo.
Yes.
Chair MacArthur.
Yes.
And this motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to item D1 from the Fire Department. Subject entails closest resource automatic aid agreement between the City of Oxnard Fire Department, the City of Ventura Fire Department, and the Ventura County Fire Protection District. The recommended action is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing Development Committee recommend that the City Council approve the formal adoption of a closest resource automatic aid agreement between the Oxnard Fire Department, Ventura Fire Department, and the Ventura County Fire Protection District. And two, authorize the Fire Chief to execute the closest resource automatic aid agreement. And Assistant Fire Chief John Calamarino is here to answer any questions we may have. Any public speakers on this item before we seek comment?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, we do not have any public speakers in person or virtually for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any committee members have any questions of Chief Calamarino on this item?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I just want to state that I'm in support of this agreement. Really just wanted to share for the public that this is an informal agreement that allows geographically closest appropriate fire department resources to respond to emergency and non-emergency calls for service countywide, regardless of jurisdiction boundaries, to ensure the highest level of fire services throughout the county. I have just two questions, really more so for the public. My first question is, how much resources and personnel are typically utilized to respond to emergency and non-emergency calls outside of our jurisdiction? And my second question is if we have sufficient equipment to be able to provide that support.
Okay, your first question. First of all, I'm John Calamarino. I'm Assistant Chief of Operations for the Fire Department. Good evening. To answer your question, the first part, and I might need you to repeat that second one. The number of resources and personnel that respond outside of the city, whether it be into Ventura County's jurisdiction, Ventura City's, or federal fire's jurisdiction on the basis, is dependent on the call type. If, for instance, an emergency medical call may require just one Oxnard apparatus, an engine with either 3 or 4 firefighters on board, or a structure fire in the city of Port Hueneme that could result in 3 fire engines, 2 ladder trucks, and 2 battalion chiefs responding. But as Chief Hamilton's video stated, anytime we respond into another jurisdiction as part of the closest resource agreement, that jurisdiction will eventually take command and their resources will finalize the incident. This is for initial dispatch and I guess if the incident was long enough, our resources could be there for a while. But we always, all three agencies, we have an agreement as part of the agreement to prioritize releasing the other agency's resources.
Great, thank you. And I just to follow up to the second question, if we have sufficient resources and, or just sufficient equipment to provide that support.
We do. And just for background, we've been operating informally under this closest resource agreement since the end of 2016. And the intention is just to formalize this now and to kind of clean it up.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Assistant Chief. I appreciate you formalizing this, but I certainly, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, the duty to respond and help and protect anyone who needs our help. And certainly you're the experts and you make that call when necessary. So I'm fully in support of this. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Make a motion to adopt it as recommended. Yeah. Madam Clerk, call for the vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee Member Perallo? Yes. Committee Member Bettis?
Yes.
Chair MacArthur?
Yes,
And this motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
thank you. We'll next move to item D2, Community Development Department, subject, update the city's certified local coastal program to fulfill the requirements to plan for sea level rise. The recommendations receive a presentation from staff and the city consultant on the city's local coastal program update. The live presentation by local coastal program consultant Carolyn Groves, coastal planner Dudek. And I know members of Mr. Jeff Pengilly's office are here as well. I see Kathleen here. Any public speakers on this item before we get to committee members' comments or questions?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, we do not have any public speakers in person and virtually for this item. Thank you.
Were there any written comments? I didn't see any on the packet you provided on it.
Chair MacArthur and committee members, we did not receive any written comments for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any, before we get to the presentation, any comments? I just want to say, Kathleen and Mr. Pengilly, thank you for the time you afforded me in providing that very comprehensive presentation before this. I really, and there's a lot of technical jargon in there, and so I just appreciated that the very comprehensive presentation and the conversation we had. So thank you for that. If no comments, we'll move to the presentation.
Thank you, Chair MacArthur, committee members, Jeff Pengilly, Community Development Director. As noted by the recommendation, this is just to receive a presentation. There's no decisions to be made here. We wanted to update this committee on what is about a 40%, maybe 50% the way through a 3-year work effort to update the city's local coastal program as indicated for sea level rise vulnerability and the adaptation plan. I'd like to introduce Kathleen Mallory, our Planning and Sustainability Manager, and she can introduce the rest of her staff and our consultant.
Thank you, Jeff. Chair MacArthur and committee members, Kathleen Mallory, Planning and Sustainability Manager. So this evening is just a presentation and informational session. We're here to answer questions, to have a discussion with you on, as mentioned by the mayor, a very technical content. Fiscal impact analysis will be brought before either city, committee, or council in 2026. We wanted to thank the collaborative work we've had with the Public Works Department. And we also wanted to introduce Matt Simpkins, who's our management analyst and has taken one of the key roles in supporting the city in this work effort. And then Carolyn Groves with Dudek. She'll be giving the presentation and she'll introduce the other 2 Dudek team members on the screen. So Carolyn, feel free to jump up and give the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you for having me, Mayor and council members. I am Carolyn Groves. I'm a coastal planner with Dudek and lucky enough to be contracted with the city to help with this LCP update. We also have virtually my 2 coworkers. Henry Eckold is another planner with our office, and then Patrick Miskell is our coastal engineer. So I want to make it clear, I am not an engineer. Patrick is our technical expert. I am here for planning questions. But with that, oh yeah, sorry, we can get the presentation up. Perfect. Let me go back. Okay, so as Kathleen said, we're here to talk about the first part of getting to an LCP update, specifically to plan for sea level rise. So the local coastal program is basically the local government's regulatory mechanism, a plan that governs development in the city's coastal zone. So the California Coastal Act was passed back in the 70s that required development of these kind of local coastal programs. And overall, that Coastal Act governs how development is carried out within the coastal zone, which can extend up to 5 miles from the shoreline. So it can vary greatly throughout the state how big the coastal zone is. The California Coastal Commission is the main state agency that's responsible for implementing the Coastal Act and certifying local coastal programs. So Oxnard's coastal area represents about 15% of the city's overall land area. So it's a small portion, but it runs the entire coastline, excepting the portion that's owned and operated by the county. The city's local coastal program is certified. It was certified back in the 80s, and it consists of 2 parts. So there's a land use plan that has kind of the overall policies, goals, the principles the city's going to operate by within the coastal zone, and then the local implementation plan, that's your zoning code. So that's everything you need to actually implement those policies in the land use plan. And like I said, the LCP has to get certified by the Coastal Commission to take effect. So if a local government does not have a certified LCP, that means the Coastal Commission keeps permitting jurisdiction and they permit all the projects in the coastal zone. Oxnard does have a certified LCP, so you guys have been issuing your own coastal development permits for development since that's been certified. So in essence, the LCP is taking the statewide Coastal Act policies and tailoring them down to a local level. So the goals of the LCP mirror the goals of the overall Coastal Act. It's to protect coastal resources, to manage development along the coast in a way that ensures sustainability and resilience, especially in the face of climate change, ensuring public access and recreational opportunities along the coast. That's something that the Coastal Commission really prioritizes. Balancing conservation with coastal dependent uses. So the Coastal Act really wants to preserve fishing, shorefront tourism, agriculture that's dependent on the coastal zone, things that are coastal dependent uses. Implementing coastal policies that align with local, state, federal, and federal coastal management. So as I said, the LCP is kind of a distillation of the state Coastal Act, which is in turn California's way of implementing the Federal Coastal Zone Management Act. So if you kind of trace it all the way down, the LCP is implementing that federal legislation on a local level. And then finally, reducing risk from coastal hazards, including sea level rise, and guiding development away from vulnerable areas, encouraging resilient design. So planning for coastal hazards is not new. There have always been hazards present at the coast that affect how development is guided. We're introducing a new kind of set of hazards that come along with sea level rise and updating that for future planning. As I mentioned before, the city's LCP was first certified back in the 80s. And there have been a handful of small amendments processed since then, but the LCP has largely, the meat of it has largely remained the same since it was first certified in the 80s. And as I mentioned before, the certified LCP allows the city to process your own coastal development permits and set your own policies for the coastal zone. So the city first started this effort to update the LCP for sea level rise several years ago. And by the year 2019, the city had a draft vulnerability assessment and adaptation report to deal with sea level rise. At that time, in 2019, the city paused its work on the LCP amidst negotiations with the Coastal Commission about how to really get specific tailored policies that are really applicable for the city, its development, and its priorities. So in the intervening years, Coastal Commission updated their published sea level rise guidance. They came out with a new updated version in 2024, and that's when DUDEC came back on board and we picked up where the old draft had left off, updated it with the new guidance, with new science, with new planning principles, and that's what we are now bringing to you. As Kathleen mentioned, there are significant fiscal implications associated with everything we're going to talk about, but we will not be discussing the fiscal side tonight specifically. We are still in the process of doing all that analysis, and we'll be bringing that back to, like Kathleen said, either a committee or the city council early next year. To set the stage, the city's existing certified LCP breaks the coastal zone up into 4 planning areas. That's already in the certified LCP, and we're continuing that division going forward. It makes it really easy to do neighborhood scale adaptation, which is something the Coastal Commission already recommends, and Oxnard's 4 planning areas were already very nicely set up to allow that. So we're gonna keep doing that going forward. So getting into some of the science about what is sea level rise, why are we talking about all of this? So global sea levels are rising due to global climate change. This is something that has already been observed. We're in the beginning stages of seeing the rate of sea level rise increase over time, but we are just in the beginning stages of it. I want to stress that. So as I mentioned, coastal hazards are already present along the coast and already something Oxnard has to deal with. But those coastal hazards are expected to increase in both frequency and severity as sea level rise increases. So we're talking about flooding, both from just regular tides as well as storm events. We're talking about erosion, so the wearing away of sand and sediment from the beaches, and storm events themselves, so like wave impacts, tsunami risk, things like that. The Coastal Commission, which again is the state agency responsible for certifying this LCP, recommends using the best available science to study these kind of eventualities and to use multiple scenarios. So, as I'm going to talk about in a second, basically the exact rate of sea level rise is something that we can model, we can predict, we can extrapolate from data, but we cannot with 100% certainty say this exact amount of sea level rise is going to happen by this exact date. I wish I had a crystal ball and I could just say exactly what's going to happen in the future, but we have to plan for multiple scenarios to kind of hedge our bets and use a precautionary approach to make sure that we're prepared for any eventuality. And that goes along with, as I said, the best available science. We are using the Cosmos model, which is published by USGS, the US Geological Survey. There are several different climate change and sea level rise models that can be used. We referenced several different models, but Cosmos was the primary one we relied on, and it's the one that Coastal Commission recommends to use. So as I was mentioning before, the exact rate of sea level rise is impossible to predict 100%, and that's largely because it's tied directly to our future global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's another factor that plays into this, is that, we as Oxnard can take certain actions to protect our own city, but the actual rate of sea level rise is tied to global society's actions, which is way beyond, our capacity to control. And so like I mentioned, there's a range of different scenarios that we look at and plan for so that we're prepared for anything, basically. The IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, and the California State Ocean Protection Council define these scenarios that we can study for sea level rise. So a quote-unquote low scenario would be if we were somehow collectively as a society able to greatly curtail all of our current greenhouse gas emissions and get it going in the opposite direction. That would mean 1 foot of sea level rise and a less than 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase by the year 2100. So we're talking about pretty far off here. The intermediate scenario, which is if the current rate of today were to continue on the same path into the future, would mean 3.3 feet of sea level rise and 3 degrees Celsius temperature increase by the year 2100. And I should say, when I say 1 feet or 3 feet of sea level rise, that means literally the level of the ocean will be a foot higher than it is today. And then the high scenario, which is if under the scenario that we were globally actually to increase our greenhouse gas emissions, that would mean a 4 or greater degree Celsius temperature increase and 6.6 feet of sea level rise by year 2100. So again, we have these kind of different ways it could go in the future depending on how we as a society act. So in our particular vulnerability assessment and the correlating adaptation plan, we have defined 5 benchmarks of sea level rise amounts. So 0, 1.6, 3.3, 4.9, and 6.6 feet. So these are kind of progressing in time. The ocean's getting higher and higher. And then on the right here, we have the kind of approximate year range, again, from the intermediate to high scenarios for when those levels would occur. And you'll notice, there's a pretty big gap there. Like the range of years that they could occur is pretty large. And as you go farther out in the future, the range actually increases, right? Because the further out in the future we're looking, the more uncertain it is. But again, this is all kind of operating from a precautionary principle where we're planning for the worst case scenario, but hoping for the best. So as I mentioned before, the city's LCP, the existing certified one, is already broken out into 4 planning areas. So we have one is McGrath Mandalay Beach up in the north, just starting at the Santa Clara River. Planning area 2 in the red is the Oxnard Shores area that includes the Oxnard Shores neighborhood, the Channel Islands neighborhood. And then 3 is the kind of lower half of the Channel Islands harbor. It includes the areas around the harbor that are surrounding the jurisdiction of the county. And then skipping over Port Hueneme down to planning area 4 is Ormond Beach. So
Carolyn, hold on
yes,
one
please.
second.
Is there any way staff can blow the map up for the few people that are probably watching this? They might wonder where I am. Or at least when this comes back to the city council, we have it that it can be seen.
Yes, good note. And I should say the future maps that we're going to show you in a minute are broken out to each planning area, so they should be a little bit more legible. And so yes, so the vulnerability assessment and the adaptation plan are all tailored to these planning areas. We use them as a sort of neighborhoods. And they give us a nice way to kind of group the resources and development and look at large and small scale adaptation solutions. So starting with, there's gonna be a ton of maps. I know you guys have already seen these, but there's gonna be a lot of maps. We'll go through each of them. So we're gonna have maps for each planning area, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first map on the left here, and we're starting in planning area 1 up at McGrath Mandalay Beach. The map on the left is showing just existing resources, so the public beach, the 2 power generating stations, there's some gas transmission pipelines, there's the campground up at the north. Those are just all things that we want to be cognizant of and watching how the hazards interact with them. On the right-hand side, you have the shoreline position map, which is basically erosion. So it'll get more apparent in the later planning areas. In this particular planning area, the erosion is a little hard to see because the beaches in this particular area are relatively stable because it's just south of the river, so it gets all that nice sediment input from the river, and the beaches here are relatively stable compared to other beaches. So the erosion impacts here are notable. There is some level of erosion over time, especially as you get up to 6.6 feet of sea level rise, but it's not going to be so bad that it's getting up to, Harbor Boulevard or anything like that. Moving into flooding. So these are 2 different flooding maps for the same area. The map on the left is with the mean high water tide, and the one on the right is with a 100-year flood, or a 100-year storm. So essentially, the one on the left is the sort of non-storm, more or less everyday conditions. I do want to give a caveat that when I say everyday conditions, that doesn't mean this specific scenario is guaranteed to happen every single day. It means there's a statistically significant chance that it could happen on any given day, if that makes sense. So again, on the left is just non-storm, semi-daily conditions, and then on the right would be if there was a 100-year storm. And when I say 100-year storm, I mean a storm that's so big it has only a 1% chance of happening any given year. So this is a storm that would really significantly, it would be talked about for decades, and it's a really big event. So as you can see on the left, there's some limited flooding around the kind of the power plant stations that actually originates from a combination of both the ocean side itself and that Edison, the old kind of defunct Edison cooling channel that goes from the power plant stations down into the harbor. You'll see that in this planning area as well as in planning area 2, that channel actually becomes a source of flood hazards as time goes on. So again, with just the tidal flooding, not too significant in planning area 1. With a 100-year storm event, see there's quite a bit of, in that dark blue, that's the 6.6 feet of sea level rise scenario. So during a 100-year storm, you would get flooding that is originating from the north, from the Santa Clara River, combining with flooding coming from the ocean, combining with flooding coming from that channel. So it's all three of those sources converging in the low-lying area along Harbor Boulevard there. Oh, yes, thank you.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Chance, do you have a PowerPoint? Do you have a pen with a PowerPoint that you can highlight that thing? So bingo. Can you show just where the ocean is and where the flooding will go to in the 100-year storm?
Yes, so this,
Just for
this is
the
100
few
year.
people, I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised that there's nobody here from the neighborhood councils. They were aware of this.
I'm sure we will hear more from them as this our
It's like
outreach process goes
there's a
on.
term for that. It's a day late and a dollar short.
Yeah. So yes, so we have the Santa Clara River up here at the north, flooding coming from that area. We have wave action coming up over the beach, and then we have this is the that channel right there, or canal, I suppose, and that also contributes to the flooding at the power plants right there. Yes, yes, thank you. All right, getting into planning area 2. So this is the Oxnard Shores residential neighborhood is right here. We have Channel Islands over here. We have the hotel. I should note that this ag parcel is county, so that's not within cities or this study area. And we also have the beach park here, I should say as well. So moving into erosion, here we do start to see erosion. I know it's a little hard to see at this scale, but this is where erosion becomes a more serious issue. With assuming no kind of armoring or significant nourishment, erosion would get such that with 3.3 and 6.6 feet of sea level rise, that it's actually getting into the first line of homes there in Oxnard Shores. So it would be, the beach would be completely gone, and you would have just the ocean right up to the houses. And then we get into flooding. So again, on the left is just mean high water tidal flooding. The lighter kind of color blue is 3.3 feet of sea level rise, and the darker blue is 6.6. So you start to see some flooding around weak points in the, I'm going to call this the kind of the upper part of the harbor, the planning area 2 area of the harbor. And I should point out, this is the area of the harbor that is under city jurisdiction, as opposed to planning area 3 is under county jurisdiction. So here we see the flooding start to overtop the shoreline protection system around the upper harbor at 3.3 feet of sea level rise. And then at 6.6, you see a couple things. So there's even more, basically the entirety of, you know, this lower part of the Channel Islands neighborhood is flooded with 6.6 feet. You also see, again, the banks of the Edison Canal start to overflow at 6.6 feet, spilling both into these dunes here, as well as that county ag parcel. And then the Oxnard Shores neighborhood. So 3.3 feet of sea level rise, not too extensive flooding, but with 6.6 feet, you really see it. It's pretty widespread. And then it's basically just even more extensive with the 100-year flood. It's the same kind of pattern of flooding, the same low-lying areas in Oxnard Shores and in the lower part, or the upper part of the harbor, excuse me. But it's just more severe with the 100-year storm. I should note this kind of southern section of Planning Area 2, the southwestern section, I believe, is the topography and the way it was graded, and it's such that the flooding hazards really don't reach there. So it's something to keep in mind. We're not looking at only the places that are experiencing hazards, but which areas are relatively safe, so that we could, know that those areas can be relied upon to continue having coastal development there. Yes, please.
Your map showing the 100-year flood.
Yeah.
What would be the assumption of the 100-year flood when the 100-year flood passed? How much of the area would be out from underneath flood?
I'm not sure if I understand. So the
The 100-year flood comes,
yeah.
then the water recedes. How
Oh,
much?
yes.
How much of the area is out from underneath water?
Well, I don't know. I don't know, Patrick, if you want to jump in, but I don't know if it's possible to say with 100% certainty. It depends on the exact severity of the event, what kind of protections are put in place beforehand to prevent flooding. There are certain criteria of like how long it has to be underwater to be shown on this map. So Cosmos has a threshold of how long it has to be underwater to count as flooding. But I will say in our kind of, in the financial analysis we're doing right now, we're treating the 100-year flood as like a one-time event that you could recover from, so that property wouldn't be a total loss. Whereas with that tidal flooding, that's like, flooding that happens, that's nuisance flooding that happens on such a rate that the property itself would be lost, if that makes sense. So the 100-year flood would be severe, it would cause a lot of damage, but the properties likely wouldn't be uninhabitable after that, right? You'd be able to rebuild.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Patrick, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just mention that these figures actually don't show the drainage aspect of it. So to answer the question, no, you can't tell from these because this just shows where the flood reaches. But in terms of the drainage, that would depend on the stormwater drainage system in each area and kind of the topography. So basically, the drainage part of the flooding isn't shown in these figures.
So we know water would get there, we just don't know how long it would stay in any particular area, basically.
Yeah, Carol, I don't know if you want to mention the instantaneous wave run-up
Yeah,
points.
so again, I know it's kind of hard to see at the scale, but the triangles along here actually show the individual wave run-up risk. So, with a storm, you see higher than or greater than average waves. Usually there's kind of a pattern to that, but every once in a while you could get like, a wave that goes higher, a rogue wave that goes higher than the others. And so these triangles kind of represent like the highest possible distance that a wave could run up into the neighborhood. And you'll see with 6.6 feet, I mean, it's up into Oxnard shores.
Yeah, so the points display where it will be flooded just for a single instant, just a wave runs up and floods it. But the shaded areas, that shows where for a certain time period there will be a certain water depth. So that does show not the drainage part, but the flood extent where it will be continually flooded versus just sort of for an instant flooding will reach there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Patrick. All right, moving on to Planning Area 3. So, as I mentioned before, the jurisdiction is different here. So, the city does not manage the beach or I believe it's the first 3 rows of houses in this area. Hollywood Beach is managed by the county, and the interior waters and the actual shoreline protection system around the harbor itself are also managed by the county. So the actual city-controlled resources or areas that we looked at in this area are, kind of split into these 3 long, narrow strips on either side of the peninsula and the harbor in that middle peninsula there. So we have residential and commercial uses, we have a fire station, we have the Coast Guard station, we have Kitty and Hobie beaches, and some parks and parking lots along the edges there. Getting into erosion, so again, this is not so much a direct problem for the city in this particular area because the county controls the beaches here, but it's in the city's best interest to be aware of erosion here, and especially of what the county is planning to do, because whatever the county chooses to enact along the beaches here will impact how this kind of western area is exposed to oceanfront hazards. So again, you do see pretty significant erosion here. If the county were to do nothing, the beach would erode back to where the houses are in Hollywood Beach. And I should say too, this is also, the Army Corps has their own, dredging regime here at the mouth of the harbor, and they do sediment placement as well. So all of this is kind of assuming that the Army Corps will keep doing their standard, practices. And there is certainly, when we get into the adaptation plan, we'll get into identifying new sediment sources, but all of this erosion is just, the model is assuming that there's no additional nourishment. Yes?
Just one question. I know
Yeah.
you mentioned the county, just for the public's awareness, the county would be working in synergy, right? Whatever policies and plans are created with the city, they'll have to be in alignment as well.
Yeah, so lucky for us, actually, the county is much farther along in their process than we are. So they already have their vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan. They already have their LCP policies. They're actually being reviewed by Coastal Commission right now. So we already know what the county is planning to do on Hollywood Beach, and it fits perfectly with what we're also planning to do. And we also have been in conversations with Dave Ward and the other folks over at the county, within planning and harbor department, I should say. We have a regional working group that we've established that meets once a quarter to coordinate those kind of cross-jurisdictional concerns. Because yes, once we get into the adaptation plan, it'll become very apparent that, especially in Planning Area 3, the city's plans and the county's plans are like one and the same, basically, because there's no way that we can isolate our resources or our risks between the jurisdictions. They overlap, and we have to work together. All right, Planning Area 3, flooding. I know it's a lot of blue. Again, this is highly dependent on the shoreline protection system around the harbor and what happens on Hollywood Beach. So the maps are actually not that different in this instance. The topography and the flooding patterns are such that the kind of semi-daily tidal flooding would be pretty much the same extent as the 100-year flood. So you see with 3.3 feet, the lighter blue, you start to see the first place to flood is these parking lots and open spaces on the western side of the harbor, right there. And then with 6.6 feet, you see the more extensive flooding. I should say 3.3 also starts to flood this middle peninsula. And then with 6.6, it's, most of the area here. There are particular low-lying or otherwise weak spots that we've identified, mostly Kitty and Hobie beaches. There's already nuisance flooding there that I'm sure you're aware of down at the south end of Victoria. So those are low-lying areas that will continue to have increasing flooding. And basically there comes a point when the existing shoreline protection devices are not tall enough and they'll be overtopped. All right, skipping over Port Hueneme down to Ormond Beach. I should say as well, we, throughout this whole process, have been very aware of OBRAP, all the activities that they're doing. We're trying to coordinate all of our plans so that there's no overlapping or redundancies, but we're, working together. So for Planning Area 4, the major resources, obviously we have the beach itself, we have the OBGS power plant down here, and the infrastructure associated with that. We have the wastewater treatment plant and some other private industrial areas surrounding it, and then the Halico Superfund sites are right here. So for erosion for Ormond Beach, there is, pretty significant erosion going back into the beach here. Since there's much less development here, there's no residential areas. It's not quite as consequential for development, but yeah, the beach would be greatly reduced if there were no action taken to combat erosion here. And it would, it's, again, Cosmos isn't quite sophisticated enough to predict what would happen to the lagoon if the ocean were literally to erode away all the sand and then the lagoon just joins with the ocean. That's way more technical exercise than we're capable of doing, but that would be another thing to keep in mind here. Moving into flooding. So with Planning Area 4, it's a little hard to paint the entire picture with this zoomed in view because the flooding sources kind of come from all directions, even all the way down from the naval base down to the south. But essentially, there's a tipping point here for both the tidal flooding and for the storm flooding of around 4.9 feet of sea level rise, where the flooding becomes way more widespread. So 3.3, not too significant. It's really just kind of limited to the beach. And then when you get up to 6.6, there's extensive flooding all throughout the area. Again, the topography is such that the Halico sites seem to be kind of graded above everything else. Not to say that they're safe from flooding, but they're at a greater elevation than, say, the wastewater treatment plant, which is also right along that creek right there. All right. So now that I've showed you all of the vulnerabilities that the city is subject to, what are we going to do about all of that? So the Coastal Commission recommends, having a suite of different adaptation options that are good for different, scenarios or cost different things. So we have categorized our adaptation options into these kind of 5 overarching categories. So we have hard engineering, that's your traditional man-made things like seawalls, elevating structures above hazard level. We have nature-based adaptation options, that's using natural ecological processes to our benefit to actually protect development from sea level rise hazards. So it's things like beach nourishment, creating dunes, using wetlands. Hybrid adaptation strategies are combining elements of both hard engineering and nature-based to kind of get the best of both worlds. Operational strategies are things that we would normally think of as public works or emergency services carrying out. So it's things that are done to prepare and respond to hazards. And then planning categories, which are policies or programs that would be carried out by planning or public works to adapt to sea level rise through land use policies. Before I get into the specific adaptation measures we're recommending, I want to make a note that a central idea to all of these measures is this idea of adaptive management. So because we are making these plans for far off future dates, we want to make sure that as time actually progresses and we see the effects in real time, that we check what we're doing and make sure it's actually working, make sure we don't need to make any adjustments. So this involves monitoring, having set monitoring metrics that we're looking at over time to see how effective our strategies are and how fast sea level rise is progressing. So that's kind of an inherent part of any of these strategies. So in addition to the planning area specific strategies that I'm going to get into in a second, we also have these citywide strategies that can be applied across the entire coastal zone. So we have offshore ecological enhancements. So we can actually use reefs and kelp forests offshore and sediment berms to help alter the wave dynamics and the sediment accretion in this area. The city of Oceanside is actually piloting a re-beach project right now that's creating these artificial headlands and doing all this offshore work to try to control how the waves hit the shore. So we can explore things like that here. Sediment management, as I mentioned, there is kind of an existing sediment management regime in the area from the Army Corps, from the different harbors, all the dredging that's done. As time goes on, new sediment sources will need to be identified to increase the beach nourishment to combat erosion. Stormwater and drainage improvements. So as Patrick kind of alluded to before, a lot of the flooding dynamics we're going to talk about are entirely dependent on the stormwater infrastructure that the city has and how that can respond to greater water levels. So stormwater and overall drainage improvements are something that can be looked at in any of the planning areas. Working with private utility companies, so there's a lot of private property that is at risk from these vulnerabilities. The power generating stations, any of the water, gas, infrastructure, any of that. It is the responsibility of those private companies to adapt their own facilities, but obviously the city wants to make sure that public services are still provided without interruption. So it's in the city's interest to work with those utility companies to make sure they're ready for sea level rise. Regional government collaboration, so as I mentioned, especially with the county, but also with our neighbors in City of Ventura, City of Port Hueneme, Port of Hueneme, Naval Base. We're all kind of facing this exact same problem, and we have shared resources, shared hazards, so it's really in our best interest to synergize our efforts and work together. And then integrating solutions into the capital improvement plan. So as we mentioned, this is going to cost something to implement, and a lot of these adaptation options would be really well suited to slot into a capital improvement plan. Getting into the adaptation strategies recommended for each planning area. So I should say too, before I get into this, these strategies are recommended or envisioned as a pathway. So because the hazards themselves are covering multiple different areas and the actual development, has relationships between them, all of these adaptation measures are related. You can't just do one thing in a vacuum and have it, protect all the development. You have to do a suite of different strategies that rely on each other to comprehensively protect all the development. So these are not, ranked or prioritized in any certain way. They all work together holistically. So for planning area 1, and you'll see this repeated in planning areas 2 and 4, to address the erosion on the beaches, we recommend working with the County of Ventura and state parks to combat erosion and keep the beaches wide through nourishment, cobble berms, and eventually creating vegetated dunes. I should say historically, the entire Oxnard coastline was dunes. There were dunes as far as the eye could see, so that's kind of the natural ecology that this area supports. And dunes are fantastic at buffering development from wave action, from erosion, and so restoring dunes along the entire coastline is kind of a long-term goal that we recommend. Help state parks improve McGrath State Beach by enhancing the Santa Clara River mouth. Again, this is, the McGrath campground is resources that the city wants to protect, but it is under state parks jurisdiction, so the city will want to work with state parks on whatever they plan to do to protect that campground. Protect Harbor Boulevard with temporary flood barriers, a vegetated berm or levee, hard flood barrier, or elevation of the road. So as we saw, Harbor Boulevard will get flooded by 6.6 feet of sea level rise. Obviously, in that particular area, Harbor Boulevard is a very critical connector outside of the city, and the jurisdiction is shared with the county as well. So there's several different ways you could protect Harbor Boulevard depending on the collaboration with the county and what that yielded. Work with power plant owners to restore the sites as dunes or wetlands, or build armoring around the plant. So obviously the future of kind of all 3 of the power plants in Oxnard's different areas are on different timelines. But we just want to make sure that whatever gets either redeveloped or restored on those sites is prepared for sea level rise. And then, again, work with whoever the private property owner for the Edison channel to reduce the flood risk that emanates from that channel to other development. Moving into PA2, similar strategy for the beaches, use nourishment, berms, and dunes to keep the sand and sediment on the beach. Strengthen the Channel Islands harbor flood protections by evaluating the current system. So there's already a system of revetments and riprap and seawalls and bulkheads around the upper harbor. Knowing how we can augment or strengthen those will be really important, as well as improving overall stormwater infrastructure and drainage in the upper harbor area. Again, work with the property owner for the Edison channel, which we already talked about. Using parks and open spaces for flood protection. So this is something you'll see again in PA3 as well. In the areas where there's open space, where there's parking, where there's uses that could be displaced somewhere else, we can use the areas that are actually safe to our advantage. So creating dunes or wetlands that can buffer development, and basically using those kind of sacrificial areas to protect the actual residences. Protecting critical roadway networks. So again, similar to Harbor Boulevard and PA1, we're starting with temporary flood barriers, then moving into more hard armoring to protect really critical roadways that are connectors between neighborhoods. And then finally, through development policies, allow measures for property owners to protect neighborhoods and homes through temporary flood protections, through wave barriers or seawalls, and through elevating homes. So this is particularly for the Oxnard Shores neighborhood. As you saw that extensive flooding, we want to allow property owners the chance to adapt to their individual properties, either through some kind of neighborhood-wide armoring or through actually elevating the homes up above the flood risk. For PA3, most of the measures in this area rely on the county because they're the ones that control both the beach and the inner harbor. So work with the county harbor department to strengthen the shoreline protection devices around the harbor, work with the county planning department to maintain the beach, Hollywood Beach. Similar measures for the roadway networks here, so temporary flood protection measures moving into harder armoring, especially along Harbor Boulevard. There's also an opportunity in this particular area to use the parking lots and green spaces around the harbor for things like bioretention units. So kind of small scale, again, nature-based or hybrid strategies that can absorb floodwater. And then the fire station is also something of concern in that particular planning area. So we'll want to either or elevate and or armor the station there. And then finally for PA4, again, being considerate of the activities that are already going on through OBRAP. We want to use that project to maintain the beach and lagoon, which will protect the development that's behind the beach and lagoon. Strengthen the wastewater treatment plant and industrial areas by building seawalls, elevating structures, work with the OBGS owner to either armor the site if it's not demolished or to somehow redevelop or rehabilitate the site to be safe from sea level rise. The EPA and the Department of Toxic Substances Control are responsible for the cleaning up the Halico Superfund sites. I should mention we didn't show the groundwater maps today because it's just too much information, to be honest. But the Halico sites in particular are susceptible to groundwater rise from ocean water actually pushing the groundwater table up. And then finally, protecting important roads through, again, those temporary flood barriers, moving up to either hard armoring or improving the overall drainage of the area. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm coughing a little bit. All right, so now that we know all of that, where are we going from here? So, as Jeff mentioned, we're well into the process of getting this report done. The report itself is, I've distilled this down, but it's probably about 150 pages right now. So it's very technical. There's a lot of information. When you actually get to see it, it'll be a ton. But we're getting really close to being done with it. We are going to go to do additional community outreach after this committee meeting so that members of the community can see these maps, see what we're proposing, have their input. We are coming back with the financial impact the financial impact of what would happen if we did nothing, what the vulnerabilities would actually cost, along with the cost-benefit analysis of the adaptation options. So what do the various adaptation measures cost and what is their benefit for the community? Sure. Yes, please.
Having been aware of the levee going the Santa Clara River with us, can you please explain for the public the cost ratio benefit, how that works? How a determination is made. I know on the levee, they made a determination of what the value of the property was on the other side. If it got flooded out, how much money they could afford to spend to fix the levee. If the property on the other side of the levee wasn't that valuable, it was out of luck.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's pretty plain English, but.
I don't have the history with it, so I don't want to speak.
Councilmember Perillo, Committee Member Perillo, yeah, so it's going to be a complicated analysis. It'll depend on what is being protected and what measures are being utilized. So again, the city's focused on its public infrastructure, not necessarily protecting private property, but major roadways that might need to be a lifeline to get in and out of a community or an area. Some of those protective measures might, as a side benefit, help some properties, but that's not the intent. There could be water and sewer lines that the city operates. There could be sewer pump station, lift stations. There could be a variety of different types of infrastructure that are not necessarily what they were looking at on the Santa Clara River, which is primarily homes being flooded. So it's going to be a complicated analysis that'll look at all those different scenarios and what types of infrastructure are being protected.
Thank you, Mr. Vangeli. Even that information, I'm sure, is beneficial to who's ever watching. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so, and I should mention as well, as I said, we're going to have additional community meetings after this about the vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan. I should note that we've already had a series of community outreach meetings. Early last year, we had a meeting to just introduce the concept of this LCP update to the public. We also had a series of more focused meetings about these vulnerability maps and the adaptation options where we got some great public input. So we're trying to continue that before we finalize the document. Yes.
I can ask another question. I represent that general district area, just so that the people that say nobody told me about it, these were publicly advertised meetings.
Yes.
And we had numbers of people show up. Do we know how many people showed up at those meetings?
I think the
And the only
overall
reason I'm
community meeting
asking
was
is
in the neighborhood of 30 people, and I think across all the discussion groups, we had something like 40 or 50 people total, ballpark.
About 38 in December, and these maps that you're seeing are the same maps that we presented to the community at the library, along with getting the community's input on the adaptation measures you see here. We've packaged it nicely for discussion here, but we will be we will be conducting this same presentation in 2 community meetings.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Fowler.
I should note too, along with the public, we've also been coordinating with the Coastal Commission already as well. We want to make sure at every step of the process that we're kind of vetting this with them, so that when we actually do get to the point of certifying the LCP, there's no surprises. We've done everything as they advised. So as I mentioned, we'll be coming back with more financial information early next year. And then once we finalize this vulnerability assessment and adaptation report, this will be kind of a standalone report that will help inform the actual policy updates of the LCP. It won't necessarily be a one-to-one of like every single adaptation strategy gets a corresponding policy. Some of the things will be implemented through different mechanisms, but the adaptation plan will help inform what kind of policies we develop for the LCP. So again, we'll be developing those LUP policies, running those by council, committee, planning commission, public, and then getting those certified by coastal commission, and then moving on to the zoning code or the implementation plan, and doing the same process of public input, coastal commission input, planning commission, city council, and then adoption. So, and yeah, as Jeff mentioned, we still got several years left of this process. So we're still in the semi-beginning phases, but we're making great progress. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of information. Any questions you didn't already ask? I'm happy to answer. Sorry? Sure.
The protection of it, yeah. How to harden it.
Oops.
And Carolyn, I appreciate the great presentation, makes something so technical to be able to digest all of that, so thank you for that.
Of course. Yes, so you'll see, again, the tipping point is around, it's not shown on this particular map, but 4.9 feet of sea level rise is when the flooding risk for the wastewater treatment plant really increases greatly. So there will come a time in the future, could be 100 years from now, when that plant, the area around it, will be flooded. We've spoken a lot to Public Works about this particular area and this issue. There is some capacity to armor and elevate a lot of the structures in that area. It's beyond the scope of our citywide study to really dive really deep into the wastewater treatment plant and evaluate. I know they also already have a feasibility study they did relatively recently about the potential of relocating the plant. That's not something we're recommending at this time, but it's something the city should have in the back of their mind, I would say.
Yeah, thank you for that, yeah.
Thank you. I also wanted to share that was one of the biggest questions I had during my briefing, especially for the Ormond power plant as we think about the future of the decommissioning and dismantling of that site. And it's great to know that, this presentation highlights the communication with our private utility companies in addition to even looking at the Ormond Beach area, or at least the south end of Oxnard regarding the Helicoast Superfund site and the communication that also needs to happen with these property owners. I'm appreciative of this presentation because it really highlights what the vulnerabilities are for the area, but it also shows sea level rising by approximate year and timeline on that. And considering that, I know you mentioned that there's going to be 2 community meetings that are coming up. And as we know, the South Oxnard end, there's a diverse community there, and making sure that this information is digestible and accessible in a variety of different languages. And so as we think about the process of outreach and getting this information out, I definitely encourage and know that you have all done some great work in making sure that this information gets out, but more specifically wanting to tap into our neighborhood councils that are in those proximities, including South Winds, as well as our radio stations, perhaps, figuring out ways that people are getting this information. Because as we know, it's usually the typical folks that attend these meetings, but we're really trying to get the message out because sea level rising impacts all of our communities, and having that adaptation and policy plan kind of shared with them is really important. So definitely encourage wanting to ensure that we have Spanish interpretation and that emails are being sent, looking at the easiest form of messaging, whether it is social media, reels, and just reaching people where they already are. Thank you so much again for the presentation, and definitely want to encourage the entire public, but specifically the areas that are impacted to attend that meeting, those 2 meetings that are coming up.
Yes, thank you so much. It reminds me of a good point that actually we didn't cover it in this. We tried to condense the information here a little bit, but this whole effort is being undertaken to comply with SB 272, which is a rather recent state law that was passed that requires all coastal governments to adopt a sea level rise plan as part of their LCP. There are very specific requirements of SB 272, and one of those is incorporating equity and environmental justice into the process of updating the LCP. So not only creating policies that are geared toward environmental justice, but also making sure the process of updating the policies incorporates environmental justice. So exactly to your point, we really, not only to comply with SB 272, but just to do good planning, we want to make sure that everybody who, not only the residents of the coastal zone, but everybody in the city who accesses the coastal zone has a stake and a voice in this process. So thank you for that point.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, do your coworkers have any comments they want to add?
I will ask them that question.
No, nothing to add there. That's pretty thorough, but happy to answer any questions if there's anything else.
Yeah, if you have any technical engineering questions, Patrick is your guy, but
The other gentleman?
Henry?
Nothing from me.
Okay.
Great job making it concise, Carolyn.
Well, just as one person who's been here for a little while, I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the way you present. You do a good job.
Thank you.
Dudek's got some good people. One concern I have, and your crystal ball, you mentioned it earlier. We often hear with the leader of this nation, talking about certain things. And, at one time there was a comment of doing away with the Coastal Commission. And I feel comfortable you probably don't know the answer to that, but you have any advice for this council, these 3 council members that are here?
That's a good question.
And votes do have consequences. You're absolutely right. Votes have consequences.
Yes, I would say the California Coastal Commission, even compared to other state agencies that do similar thing in other places, the California Coastal Commission is quite robust and quite strong. The legislation that supports it is quite strong. They have a great precedent and history of enforcement. There will always inevitably be differences of opinion between federal and state decision makers and legislators and people in power. But I would say, and as we're seeing, the most consequential thing we're seeing right now is federal funding drying up or going away, or things that were promised for climate change efforts are no longer allowed to be called things like that. So there's definitely fluctuation and variability that we have to respond to coming from the federal level. But in my personal, professional opinion, I don't think the Coastal Commission is going away anytime soon. I don't think the Coastal Act is going away anytime soon. The Coastal Commission is also making a real concerted effort in recent years to be collaborative and cooperative with local governments. They're really trying to be partners with both federal and local partners. So the federal administration changes every 4 years, and we have to roll with that, but we do our best to balance that with long-term priorities.
Thank you. And the only other comment I had, and I appreciate your frankness and candor. People talk about science. There are still people that don't believe that there's global warming. I'm not a scientist, but I do know that from having sat in other things, various parties can do what they call hired guns, and depending on how much you can pay and the quality of your hired gun, you may get that view, but it doesn't trump science. Science matters. Facts and evidence matter. So that's my 2 bits. Thank you. thank you for your staff.
Of course.
And I really appreciate the fact that I had the three people, ladies and two gentlemen for the city give me a presentation. I really appreciated what you guys did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No public speakers on this item? Madam Clerk?
Mayor and Chair, Mayor and committee members, we do not have any public speakers in person or virtually for this item. Thank you.
And Mayor, I'm not even asking for permission on this one. Channel Islands Neighborhood Council, Seabridge, Seaview, Riverview, Oxnard Dunes Neighborhood Councils, residents, get a hold of your neighborhood councils and ask them to make some kinds of presentations for you, so you're brought up to speed. I know that there are some neighborhoods that have not had neighborhood council meetings with the consistency that would be expected, but if you get a chance to look at this, you'll see those maps, and that's where you live.
Thank you, Ms. Groves. I appreciate the
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you, Kathleen and Mr. Pingelly and staff. Thank you for it. Does anybody have any future agenda item they'd like to? No? Okay. If not, I don't think there's anything further on the agenda. And without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.